So, Steve, you recently wrote a book, To Live and Die in the Floating World, and that's based off of your real life experience working on a boat in the canals. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I worked on the MS Wirianda. It's an Australian word named after a tree, and it was a little tiny hotel barge. We'd take 6 guests at a time, and for 10 days, and treat them like royalty for one heck of a lot of money. And it was just a job I chanced into in France. We were on the canals of Burgundy, and it was really a wonderful experience. The guests were kind of interesting, and I really made some very strong friendships with the other members of the crew. Just worked the last month of the season, but in my memory, it's almost like 5 or 6 times that, just because there were so many rich memories of that time.
Oh yeah, and you happened into the job kind of like the character in your book happens into the job as well. So there's a mix of those real life moments mixed with fiction.
Yeah. You really don't want to do too much of that. When you're writing a novel, you're writing a novel, and you don't want to keep it to what happened in real life. About the only part I have is how I found the boat. I was told we'll find it between this town and this town in a few days, and there's 40 miles in between those 2 towns. She didn't tell me that, and so I hopped on a train, thought I was miles from the boat, and it was getting dark, and it was going to rain, and I was in a foul mood, and I got off the train, and I said, well, where's the canal? And I can go look for the boat tomorrow. And they said, well, it's there at the bottom of the hill. And I go down to the bottom of the hill, and there, sure enough, is the canal. And there was the boat right there, about 50 yards away. And that's after all that. So I kind of use that in the story just for fun. So the way that Kip, who's the narrator of the story, finds the boat is the way I did too. And the other thing is, I described his job in the way that I conducted mine. The thing about helping moor the boat, helping it through the locks, driving this car that went along with the went along with the boat, and I would just run ahead of the boat and tell the lock keeper there's a boat coming in to get the lock ready, which saves a lot of time. Especially if you're going through 10 or 15 locks a day, I could save them a couple of hours. So I was important without actually having to work very hard. And I'd run for groceries and stuff like that. It was really kind of a cool job. Really enjoyed it. And so I used that, and I used my knowledge of the canals, and I actually used 2 or 3 spots that I knew very well, and I set certain incidents there so that I could see it very clearly, because I know those places. Yeah. And there's a place called Chateauneuf, which is right near the canal, and I could picture that in my head so easily, and that made it easier to write.
And paint the picture for the people reading it,
yeah.
So they could feel like they were actually there.
Yeah, because I'm not faking it, you know.
Yeah. Were any of your characters based off of real people as well, or were they mostly fiction?
Well, you know, that's I don't want to give you a libel lawyer's handbook here. But yeah, a couple of them were. The owner of the boat was an Australian woman named Diane, and in the book I called her Diane, though she's French and has a lot of characteristics that my Diane didn't. So I use her name more than anything else. Unfortunately, Diane passed away a number of years ago, so it was kind of my way of revisiting her, because even in my mind I still pictured her even while I'm doing this other character. And one of the other crew members, the skipper of the boat, was named Dilip. He was from Sri Lanka. And I've used his name, but again, the character's rather different. His characteristics are different, but physically I see him there, and I kind of describe him as I knew him, even though the character is quite different. So there's a balance of things that happen in real life, as my work experience really helps me write about the boat itself, and a couple of the characters are based on people I knew somewhat, based on people I knew.
Yeah.
So again, that makes it easier. I can picture them easily, and that makes it easier to write it.
Well, I think it definitely comes through in the book itself. Like
good.
When you're reading along, you definitely feel like you know these people, you know these places, even as being the outside reader. So I think that shines through in the text.
Well, good. I'm really pleased. And you know, even when you're coming up with fictional characters, pretty soon you see them very clearly, even if it's not based on anybody you've ever seen in your life. And they seem very real to you because they're real in your head. And so after a while, even if they're not based on real people, you see them clearly, you feel their emotions, you have some sympathy with them, you know, empathy perhaps is a better word. And And so you feel that connection, at least I do with my characters. And when I've written poorly, I did a first novel many years ago, and it's horrible. And I feel like I can still see those characters, and I feel like I let them down. I didn't write about them well enough, because they're still very real to me, and I wrote a rotten little book about them. And I like to think that for Dilip and Diane and Molly the cook, I've done a little better job this time. I thought, okay, I've written a good book for you. It's almost like you're doing it for them a little bit after a while.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a sweet visual to have of like an author really taking care of their story and taking care of their characters and being like, here you go, I'm going to tell your story to the world.
Well, in a sense, they're taking care of me too.
Yeah. How so?
Well, if they're real enough, they begin to act in certain ways that you don't have to think through. It's like a friend that you know well. They're going to act in certain ways because you know them well. And these characters in the book will do that a little bit too. They'll surprise me occasionally. Oh, I'll have him do this. That's what he would do. And so they're taking care of me too. They're saying, okay, this is what you want to write about me. Okay. And it's when I write, it's like I'm watching this movie and I'm writing down when it's going well. I'm writing down what I see and hear, and so the more clearly I see them, the more they're helping me out. And so I have that.
Well, it seems like you have like a really great understanding of the characters and the sense of place because it's based on some very real experiences you had. Was there anything for this book that you kind of had to learn more about in order to bring the story to life?
Not very much.
Yeah.
I've written some others, and sometimes I have to do a fair amount of research. Right off, the only thing I can remember doing, occasionally I would have to refer to the map, because I remember going through these towns, but I couldn't remember exactly what order they came in. So that's a pretty small thing, but I'd look at a map and think, oh yeah, we were in Tonnerre first, and then we were in, whatever that other town was. And the only other thing is I have a couple characters who are from southern France, and so I looked up what are common family names in southern France, because that's a Mediterranean culture, while the rest of France really isn't particularly. And so I looked up their name, some common names. Oh, Carbone, that's the name of one of the characters. Carbone, that works. I like that, So it became Marius Carbone, which I think is kind of a southern France kind of a name.
I would think so. Kind of has that feeling to it.
I hope so.
So it seems that this was a really interesting book to write. It definitely takes some interesting twists and turns for the audience as well as they're reading it, like all the way through, and it keeps catching you off guard.
Oh, good.
Was there a part that you really enjoyed kind of crafting more than any of the others, or?
Well, the easiest parts, and just for the enjoyment of it, I really enjoyed just writing about the book. I mean, the boat rather, and the work that came with the boat. The things that I had to sit down and really think out without giving anything away. There's kind of this big denouement, this climax, where I've got all the characters together and they've been running around and doing all sorts of things. And I always had it in my mind that that's how the book's going to end, with this confrontation here with all these characters. And it wasn't until I was about 2/3 of the way through the book I began to realize, what are they all doing there? And that was a hard one to cook up. How do I get them all in that place without revealing where it was? Because it's kind of unlikely for a couple of them. And I really had to think about that. And then, I know. And that's why he's there. And you have to come up with something plausible, because that's the difference between real life and fiction, is that a fiction novel has to be plausible, while real life does not. So if you come up with something totally implausible in your book, people are going to say, that wouldn't happen. Well, maybe it would, but it isn't very plausible. Right. So I had to really think, how do I get them all together there? And I hadn't even realized it was a problem until then. And I thought, what the hell are they doing there? And then I came up with a couple of solutions, because I had to think, okay, what are they doing there? And what are they doing there? Okay, I think I've got it. Okay, that'll work.
And put all the puzzle pieces together to complete the big picture for everybody to catch on.
And sometimes to make that happen, you realize, okay, I've got to go back to page 86 here, and I've got to change what he says, because on page 215, that's not what he does. That is, because I've got to set it up here so that this isn't a contradiction to that. So when you come up with your solutions, At least, when you come out with kind of complex plot, you've got to go back and make sure that everything is lined up correctly now.
Yeah. It seems like one of the more enjoyable experiences you had writing this book was also maybe the most challenging part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's part of why it's enjoyable.
Yeah, it's figuring it all out.
Figuring it all out, especially in, this is kind of a thriller suspense thing. And, you've got to come up with some plot twists, and you've got to come up with some excitement. And so figuring out how to make that happen can be real difficult sometimes. And so that's part of the challenge. And I have perhaps a misplaced confidence that I'll figure out something. I'll come up with something. Writer's block, I've decided, is more of a state of mind than anything else. I mean, I'll get to a point where I'm not quite sure what happens next, but I don't panic about it. And I think that's what writer's block is. It's panicking about it. And I thought, I'll come up with something. It'll be fine. I can come up with stories.
Yeah.
I'm good at stories, and so I'll figure my way out of this.
Do you have any rituals or anything that you do around your writing or around your writer's block mindset to kind of push through that?
No, not particularly. A couple of tips I read from a famous author was one, don't ever get up from the table, get up from your desk when you don't know what happens next. Always make sure you know what happens next. That's a good way to keep from getting writer's block. And the other thing is for me it's morning. Every morning when you sit down to write, go over the last few pages so that you're back up to speed, and that also gives you a chance to polish those pages. And so I always go over the last, sometimes quite a few pages, and that brings me to where I am, and then I know where I am. And if I've had any sense, I got up when I knew what was coming next anyway, but this gets me back into that context.
It re-immerses you in the world you're creating, in a sense.
Yes, that is probably a lot of it, so that I've re-entered that world by the time I'm really ready to start drafting again. As far as other rituals go, I tend to write here, and I come up with a big pot of tea and my cup and a little bit of chocolate or something like that, and I kind of nibble at the chocolate and drink my tea as I go. That's my other ritual.
Well, and it seems like these worlds that you've created, this is a departure from some of your other books that you've written up to this point. Like To Live and Die in the Floating World is a different kind of novel than your previous work.
Yes, those were set all in exotic locales in Morocco and Madagascar and Sri Lanka, and they were set in countries I got to know well when I was a Foreign Service officer, when I was a diplomat, and I was going after those strange cultures and things that can only happen in these countries. While this one, it happens in France, and even if you haven't traveled to France, you know a lot about it, and you've seen a lot of pictures. So the setting isn't quite so exotic in itself, except for you're on this boat, and that's a little different. But this one has nothing to do with the Foreign Service or anything like that. So yeah, it's a little different. And it's about a young fellow who's already on the run, and he takes this job on the boat to get away from some people, thinking they'll never find me here, not realizing that the situation on the boat is quickly going to become something where he's in far worse trouble than he was to begin with. But he's broke, and so he can't get away, because if he leaves the boat, he hasn't got any money to even find a motel or hotel for the night or anything like that. And he also falls in love, the poor dope, and so that's another reason he doesn't want to leave. He's going to play the knight in shining armor to this young woman. So yeah, it gets complex.
Oh, well, and that right there sounds like a really good teaser to go out, go read To Live and Die in the Floating World, and figure out how complex it gets, and then how you unravel it all.
Yes.
Because it sounds like that was a fun challenge.
Yeah, I ended up fairly pleased, and I had a couple people read it, and one said, here's this tweak you need to do the ending, so I did that. So yes, its publication to date is October 5th, which is coming right up, and you can get it through the usual online suppliers like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, and also you can order it through my website. It's Stephen Holgate Wright, Stephen Holgate Wright WRITE.com, and I don't charge shipping or handling.
Ooh, that's a nice bonus.
Yeah, it's
support the author directly and get a little money back in your pocket.
And I'll sign it and everything for you. Although I always warn people that my handwriting is so bad that my signature on it actually decreases the value of the book.
You'll have to send a little translation key with every one that you sign.
Yeah, it'll be like one of those forms. Sign your name here, now print it here so we know what
Right,
you
so
did.
that we know exactly what you signed. Well, wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Steve,
Well,
for
thank you,
sharing
Amanda.
information about your book, and we'll tell everybody to go out and get it.
Very good. Thank you.